everyone, and welcome to what has to be the weirdest edition of the best gaming PC parts and best gaming PC builds you can build right now that we've ever done. But the fact remains that obviously throughout this video we are going to find you the best possible gaming PCs that we can with current pricing, like the budget end, mid-range, high-end, and we're going to help you to find the perfect gaming PC for you at the best possible price. But as we know, the last few months has been pretty terrible really for PC gaming, especially when it comes to graphics cards, and obviously the announcements in the last week or so have kind of made everything go even more into like overdrive turmoil. We don't know exactly what's going to happen, but obviously we are going to show you the best possible prices as we film this, but be aware that everything is very much subject to change. So we jump in. As always, we are going to be kicking this video off at Newegg, but of course don't forget that we are going to be using global pricing. We're going to be looking at UK stores a little bit later in this video, so it doesn't matter where you are in the world. Obviously, if you use the affiliate links located down below, you'll get current pricing in your region. But the first thing I want to do for our budget system is to have a look at graphics cards. And obviously, the savior of budget GPUs was supposed to be the ARC B580. But as you can see, pricing on this is certainly not what we wanted it to be. I mean, you can get one here for $320, which in this current climate is not actually the worst deal in the world, but this is, well, it's meant to be about $250, but I don't want to like be all doom and gloom, but obviously because of where graphics cards come from, if they are going to be hit by future tariffs in the States, then I would say if you can buy a graphics card at a great price right now, personally speaking, I would do that if you know you want to buy one. Otherwise, you may well be in for the long haul over the next few months or so, because we literally don't know what's going to happen. I don't want this to come across as like scaremongering or anything like that, but obviously if you look at what is happening at the moment, as soon as tariffs hit, if like a graphics card, say, comes from Taiwan, let's say, and it's imported in, depends where all of the different bits have been in the supply line and things, we may well find that prices are going to go up a lot, not just at the high end, but then also at the more budget end as well. So let's bear this in mind for now, $320. I have a feeling you might actually be able to get better pricing on the B570, which isn't quite as good. I mean, obviously I should say these are Intel graphics cards, so they did come with a few quirks on the previous generation. This one has definitely been better. It's not like a slam dunk, but it's certainly going to offer great value for money, especially if you're going to be playing at 1440p. But there wasn't really that much difference between the B570 and the B580 when it comes to launch pricing, and it doesn't actually seem that there is that much difference on Newegg. But I know in the UK, actually there's some pretty good deals on the B570 relative to the B850. So consider both, but the B850 does have more performance and it has more VRAM and it has more longevity. Obviously the alternative would be an RTX 4060, though this is supposed to be replaced in the not too distant future. You can see that you can get it's just not great, is it? Again, this only a few months ago you could get for, on a good day, around about $270 or so. So the fact that the first decent one really is about $350 tells you all you really need to know. But RTX 4060 I would be very cautious about, because obviously it is going to be replaced, but quite how much difference we're going to see between the 4060 and the 5060 certainly doesn't look like we're going to see that much difference in VRAM. So personally speaking, I would actually take the ARC card over the 4060. So let's add this one to our basket. And then once we've done that, we can then pay attention to our CPU. And my spelling is terrible today. We've gone for a Ryzen 7600, but this is a previous generation chip. This of course being the Ryzen 5 7600. And I would either go for the 7600 or the 7600X. There's not dramatic differences when it comes to performance, but you do actually get a stock cooler with the 7600. It's not amazing. I would still upgrade to something else, but it is going to save you every penny if you like and maximize performance into components like your graphics card, rather than just spending extra money on a cooler and having to knock maybe $20 off a case that might already be $50, and it will have quite a substantial impact on your gaming PC. But this is a 6-core chip. It's not quite as fast as the newer 9600, but at this price point it's going to be absolutely fine. Obviously we are going to need to grab ourselves a motherboard for this, and here I've filtered it to B650 and B850. You could go for B650E if you wanted to spend a little bit more money, but PCI Generation 5 support that you're going to get on your graphics slot doesn't really seem to make that much difference at the moment, even on an RTX 5090. So again, at this price point I would definitely save the money and go for B650 unless there really wasn't much difference between them. And I've searched from low to high. I'm going to ignore most of these sort of open box and really cheap ones, but can I find anything suitable? We do have this ASRock B850M actually. Now I would bet that it didn't actually have Wi-Fi support. Obviously VRMs and things aren't amazing, but again, at this sort of price point with a 65-watt CPU, this is probably going to be a good option actually. And at $110 or so, that seems to be a good price, so we're going to go with this. Once we've done that, we can then have a look at our memory, or our RAM, and here we're going for 32 gigabytes of the stuff. 16 is going to be fine in a lot of games, but I found actually in Fortnite in particular, I was having quite a big issue with only 16 gigabytes of RAM. It could have been like some other things within the system, but certainly the RAM usage was running at 100%. It wouldn't give you much headroom for like running other applications and things and alt tabbing. So bearing in mind that there is a difference in price, but it's not crazy, I would definitely recommend getting 32 if you can straight out the gate. Obviously, if you're trying to save every penny, you can always claw some things back. 16 gig is going to be one of the ways to do that. But in terms of longevity and just having a great system straight out the gate, once again, I think it would be worth going for 32 over 16, but let's have a look what we can find. Ideally, we're looking for maybe CL36 and I was going to say above, below. So CL30, 6000 megahertz, that would be the sweet spot, but obviously that's kind of a little bit more expensive. We don't need RGB necessarily either, so we can get this Rip Jaws kit look for 83. But actually it looks like the best value option is going to be this, some Patriot Viper Venom, 32 gig, CL30, 6000 megahertz. So let's add this one to our cart. Once we've got that over the line, we can then move on to our SSD or solid state drive. Terabyte really or more speeds, PCI Generation 4, I'd say is close to 6000 megabytes per second on the read and writes as possible, but again, it's not the end of the world really at this sort of price point. It's just you'll find that quite often some of them are on sale. So rather than just filtering to low to high like we have here and then kind of like picking the cheapest one, you often find, as I say, that you can get something on special, but they're not all good. Emphasis on that. The way to check really is just to open it up and have a look at the speed. So go into specifications, and as you see, this one's pretty mid really, around about a PlayStation 5 sort of level, so definitely not slow. 4800, 4500, but if you can find something that's the same sort of price as this, but has faster speeds, that's usually the one I would go for. Only exception would be if you're looking at maybe a mid to upper end SSD, I would get one that has a NAND cache, just because this makes your PC that little bit more responsive when it's being heavily throttled. So we've also got this Kingston MB3. That one is actually slightly faster. And then finally we have this T-Force G50, and that one is 4800 again. So the Kingston NV3 works in our quick cheat sheet test, but obviously if you wanted to be really thorough, look at reviews for all of these drives and see how they perform in more sustained loads and applications. Now it's important to note that because the motherboard we've gone for here is micro ATX, meaning it's physically smaller, it's going to look best if you go for a micro ATX chassis. Now you can go for a larger case and that's going to be fine. As I say, will just look a little bit less neat with some of the cables coming up. But the important thing is you can't do it the other way around. If we went for a full-size ATX motherboard, you couldn't buy an ITX or micro ATX case and then put that inside there because it physically would not fit and you'd be really sad and annoyed. But for best results, we're going to look at micro ATX cases that are also a little bit cheaper usually as well because there's less material. Once again, we use our old friend sort by low to high and see what we have. I would always stay away from like the ultra cheap cases because they are going to be like, technically they might not be, but in my experience they usually like pretty flimsy and they're not great when it comes to upgrading and just being something you want to keep for a long period of time. But there often are some good deals to be had. I mean, this Salmon T3, I have not used this, but that's pretty smart looking. It just obviously has this solid front panel. That's not really something that's ideal, but at this sort of price point when I'm going to be using a more entry-level graphics card that's not going to use loads of power, you'd be surprised actually that this is probably a lot less of an issue that you think it's going to be, and it does have ventilation, it's just like not full mesh. So you could consider this, or you could go for the Q300. I've used this so many times on the channel and it's quite often my go-to recommendation because this is often very, very cheap, but it does feel it as well. So it's not my absolute favorite case in the world, but it works. I think the V2 version is definitely a fair bit better. Well, this one does look nice, I've got to admit. And it's got good reviews actually as well. All right, we're going to mix it up. We're going to go for the Zalman, but if you wanted something that has more airflow at the same price, then obviously you can go for the Cooler Master. But again, that one definitely feels a little bit on the cheap side. And then actually, I believe that leaves us with just one more component to go for our budget system, that of course being the power supply. And again, say this every video, please don't like ultra cheap skimp out, because you almost certainly will regret it later. Best case scenario, you get one that's really loud, one that doesn't have the wires and things you need, or is just really messy and doesn't look good. Worst case scenario, it's just not going to be a good power supply that's going to last, or potentially worse. Just spend a little bit more extra money on a reputable brand, and obviously check the PSU tier list to make sure that everyone's happy with it essentially. But let's have a look. The cheapest one is this Thermaltake Smart 700, but I'd rather go for something else. ASRock Challenger, I didn't even know they did power supplies now. That one could be an option, $60. Or actually this one that we usually use, which is the MSI Mag A650BN. It's slightly more expensive, but it does come with a rebate of $10. So we're essentially looking at $59.99, so call it $60. So how does that compare? Well, all of these actually are about $60 or so. EVGA is on back order, so let's count that out immediately. And here we've actually got the Zalman Gigamax in the C tier, which isn't bad for a lower end system, but the MSI is slightly above it. So basically the MSI or the Zalman are going to be pretty good to go. The Zalman is 700 watts, MSI 650, so let's go with the Zalman. And then, ladies and gentlemen, with that brings us to our grand total, because all of our components are assembled together. They just require your assembly, which leaves us with a grand total of about $860. Now, obviously, this is not the most budget system we've ever done. I know there's plenty of people saying I wanted something that was $400, $500, but obviously we try and mix it up every single video. You can look at our previous best build videos or the B750 video that we've actually built in person if you want a better idea of a really cheap system. But obviously the prices have gone up a little bit versus the last time that we've done it. I've actually been pleasantly surprised to see that most of the components are still within the range of what they should be. It is basically just the graphics card really that has gone up a fair bit, maybe the Ryzen and maybe the motherboards and things a little bit, but actually everything seems to be pretty stable for the time being, which we move on to our mid-range system, which is potentially where things might get a little bit more tricky. And I promised, did I not, everyone, that we would do some UK shopping? That's what we're going to do here, but don't worry, Americans. Oh man, why is he swiping to the UK? That's so unfair, man. All of the links are global down below. Don't worry, we just want to please everyone. I'm a people pleaser. People that I'm not particularly sure are people pleasers at the moment are the vendors of graphics cards, and this is going to be like an upper mid-range, and I think by far the best choice is really going to be one of these brand new RX 9070 GPUs, so either the 9070 or the 9070 XT. Problem is, both in the UK and obviously in the US and global really, stock and availability hasn't been great. Now, I've actually been away in Australia for 3 weeks, which was great. I needed a break, I needed a holiday, but when I've come back, the good news is that the stock has improved on these, but obviously everything else has seemed to just been going into turmoil and going nuts. So let's see what we've got in the UK at the moment. And obviously it's going to be slightly different in the States and depending on the store that you have. So if you want to go for a higher end one, the XT, bear in mind these are supposed to be about £600, or at least start from £600. You can see that they are still pretty much all out of stock. We can pre-order some. I mean, they are all out of stock. They're all really inflated. This one is £70,000 apparently, which is accurate. But yes, if you want to get hold of an XT, basically forget it at the moment, really. Like, keep checking, but on Overclockers UK at the time of filming, they don't have any, but obviously plenty of other stores are available and available around the world. So instead, you might want to have a look at the non-XT. So this is the 9070. I was really impressed with this. This was the card I used first rather than the XT. And in isolation, it's a fantastic GPU. It's got so much performance. It's great even for 4K gaming. It can do a fair bit of ray tracing. FSR4 technology is exclusive to these new cards. It's amazing. It's not quite as good as DLSS, but it's getting very, very close, right? Really, really impressive. I think you guys would love it. The issue is that the pricing on this was so close to the XT that it would make a lot more logical sense to go for the XT, because in terms of price to performance, you actually get better value with a more expensive card, which isn't usually the case. One of the things that I hate to say it is the fact that the RTX 5070 also exists. Performance is very, very similar actually to that of the 9070 non-XT, and if it is cheaper, which way would I rather go? Would I go for an overpriced, overinflated 9070, or if you could get like a 5070 for £580 or £550, is that going to be the better bet? It's hard to say, because in terms of what I would recommend to people, I think as long as you're not playing like ray trace titles and you're not maxing out the VRAM, then you sit 12 gig, it's not enough in terms of what they should be selling, but it is actually going to be enough for what most people are going to need at the time of filming. Would you rather have ever so slightly more performance and more VRAM with the AMD card, or would you rather save yourself a little bit of money and have all of the NVIDIA features and go for the 5070? I mean, I'm not really happy with either. If you need a graphics card, you need it now. There's no point saying, oh, I wish NVIDIA weren't doing what they were doing. I agree with you, but if you need something now, you can get hold of this. I'll just say that, but I'm going to go with the AMD graphics card here. I'd rather have that extra bit of VRAM. Moving on though to our next component, in terms of the CPU that we're using. Now, this isn't going to give you the best value, but if you're specifically playing games like Warzone, anything multiplayer, and you have that little bit extra money to spend, this is when this is going to be worth it, because the theoretical frame rates you can get this are going to be higher. But in terms of major, what you're going to notice differences between the 7800X 3D and maybe like a 9700X, it's not necessarily going to be as night and day as you think. And it all comes down, as I say, to current pricing and availability. So you can get this for $420, but if you go for a 9700X, then you can see you can get this for £315. So personally speaking, I know the frame rate you're going to get with this is actually going to be a little bit lower, but I think that extra £100 is probably going to be worth saving, in my opinion, based on my usage. But as I say, if you're playing just multiplayer, you've got a really high refresh rate monitor, you want the absolute highest frame rates possible now, then step up to the X3D. But just in terms of price performance, it's definitely better with the 9700X. And because of course we do have our white graphics card, we are going to need a white motherboard. This is one we've used loads of times on the channel actually. This is the B650E Aorus Elite X. Do be aware with this, you are going to have to do a BIOS update in order to get the CPU to work, but as long as it has USB BIOS flashback, which it has, this one's called Q-Flash Plus, then you can update it. But when you build this, do be aware that the system will not work until you do this BIOS update. Oh, and actually look, we've got this suggestion and it has caught my eye. Could go for something a bit different here. This Lian Li O11 Air Mini. So this is an ATX motherboard. It looks quite small on the pictures, but I guarantee it's not as small as you think. But obviously compared to like a huge tower, it is going to be a little bit on the smaller side, but £95 isn't actually too bad. It's certainly going to look special, and Lian Li cases are always built with such great build quality. If you haven't used one before and you've maybe come from more of an entry-level case, you would be very, very impressed. So I think we're going to go with this one as well. We also need to grab ourselves some DDR5 memory, 6000 megahertz, and let's have a look what we have. Annoyingly, the Delta RGB, look, that's £92. If we'd gone for a black build, that would be fine. And annoyingly, the white RAM is actually out of stock. But then so is the Corsair one. So we're just going to have to go for the pre-order, annoyingly, for this Team Group Delta. We've used it before, seems to work fine. Once again, we'll go for a PCI Generation 4 SSD, but this time we'll look at 2 terabytes, especially if you've got a slower download speed. It's definitely going to be quite useful. And let's have a look what we have. We've got an SN770, or we've got this MP600 Elite, or a Fury Renegade actually for 125. Yeah, I want to go for this Fury Renegade actually, 125. In terms of cooling, obviously we do want something that matches the theme. If you want to go for a 240 all-in-one, then you can save another £25 or so actually with the Lian Li Galahad 2. If you want to maximize price to performance, then you get the Arctic Freezer 35 ARGB. You can get that in white. It's fantastic. I love it. It's probably what I would personally go for, but it doesn't look as nice as an all-in-one. And obviously if you're spending this sort of money, then yes, I can definitely see the appeal. But I think all round for something, as I say, at this level, you're going to get something beautiful, something that sounds great, and something that obviously is very effective at cooling. And then of course, last but certainly not least, we are going to need a power supply. This time we're going to step it up a little bit to either 750 or 850. There's always like a bit of an easy way to work it out, which is just to Google the name of your graphics card and just say minimum PSU, and it will tell you what they recommend. But if you want to be a bit more specific, then you can use a PSU calculator to essentially look at all the different components in your system, how much power they use, and then what you actually need. But yes, I reckon 750 for this one is probably going to be the sweet spot. We'll sort this from low to high, and then let's have a look what we have. Now obviously bear in mind that if you're going for an all-white build, personally speaking, I think it is going to look better if you go for a white power supply with white cables, but it's definitely not the end of the world, especially if there's black elements in your case. I wouldn't worry about it too much. It depends more on price. You can see that there is this one here from Fantex, this GH750. That would probably be fine, but it's on back order. Otherwise, the A750GL from MSI, definitely going to be a good recommendation. We've used this loads of times on the channel before. This Lian Li Edge is going to be worth considering at £86 actually, but there aren't any other white ones. So if we step it up to 850, oh yes, there we are, this Lian Li Edge for £100. This is actually quite cool as well, because in a case like this where you put it in the side, it just means it's easier to actually plug everything in essentially. But yes, 850 watts, £100 in white with fundamentally white cables. Definitely going to be the way I would go. So let's add this one to our basket, and then that should give us the grand reveal. What's it going to be in terms of pricing? I mean, I'm saying mid-range. Again, let's go with upper mid-range on this. This is not a cheap system. £1,700 essentially, just under at 1696. But here's the thing, this really is the limit, I think, for most people on the amount of money you need to spend on a gaming PC, because once you get past this point, it really is past this point, I'll add, it is a game of diminishing returns. It's like high refresh rate 4K, it's ray tracing max on everything, it's having to have FSR off or FSR on the higher settings rather than using balanced or performance and things. But unless you've got a lot of money to throw at your gaming PC and you're happy to do that, as I say, the value from this point onwards really does diminish downwards. I mean, what more really do we need from this? We've got a great chip. You could go slightly higher, I suppose. That's an extra £100. There's nothing wrong with spending loads of money on a gaming PC as long as you're aware that you don't have to, essentially. But let us know your thoughts on this all-white build down in the comment section below. But let's now move on to the high-end behemoth. And I think it's going to be expensive. And actually, folks, how about we start this off with some good news? Because in the States, the 9800X3D is available at the price it is supposed to be, and it is in stock. This was not the case for ages. I think this has been helped by the fact that people have now bought them, but then also the fact that you've now got the 9900X3D and the 9950X3D as other options as well. So if you're looking to build like a high core count system that's for productivity and gaming, absolutely the 9950X3D is going to be worth buying. Just bear in mind that usually this does come down a fair bit in price over time. We don't know what's going to happen, as I say, if you're in the US at the moment with pricing on everything, so maybe that doesn't apply. But if you want to pick up a 9800X3D all the time that the stock is actually in the country, it's not a bad time to do it at around about $480. Best gaming CPU you can get, basically. So we're going to add this to our basket. We'll then see if we can find a nice matching motherboard for this, and obviously there are quite a few different options available. I'd probably go for X870 at this level if it was me personally. We've got this Tomahawk Wi-Fi for 300, that's a solid option. ROG Strix, if you're going again for a white build, that's definitely a nice looking board. But actually, I'd probably go with this Asus TUF Gaming. It's X870 and it is $280, so it's not going to cost an arm and a leg. Just because we're going for a high-end build here doesn't mean that everything has to be expensive, right? It's all about getting the maximum performance and just kind of like helping everything else just by spending enough, really, on all of the other components to get what you need from your system. If you need loads more bandwidth, you need loads more ports on your motherboards, loads of extra SSDs and things, then by all means, like spend extra money, like faster Ethernet. But for what most gamers need, I think this is going to be the perfect option. We'll then see if we can find 32 gigabytes of RAM, again 6000 megahertz CL30. I'm probably going to go with this one actually. It's usually a tie at this level between like a Trident Z5 kit like this one, or you could go for the Corsair Vengeance. It depends really whether you're going to use the Corsair ecosystem or not. If you're going to install iQOO anyway, then I'd probably go for the Corsair kit. If you're actively not going to use iQOO, then it's easier to control this with your motherboard software essentially. So we're going to go with this, and it's slightly cheaper as well at $110. Once again, we're going to grab a PCI Generation 4 SSD. You can go for Gen 5, but it's still not worth it when it comes to price performance for gaming. It's not going to make a massive amount of difference. We could go for a 990 Pro 2TB here for $170. It's not terrible. Stepping it down slightly, you could go for this WD Black SN850X, but the one actually that's catching my eye is this one, the MSI Spatium. Does it have an NAND cache though? No. So instead we are going to go for this WD. And now that our board is complete, I've probably put it long enough. Let's get the expensive bit out of the way, shall we? The graphics cards. And essentially there's going to be three that you're going to be looking at for like the highest end builds. The 5090, 5080 and 5070 Ti. 5070 Ti is by far the one I like the most out of all of them, but they're all very lazy graphics cards. And let's start with the 5090. We've got the Astral, $3,300. Why would anyone pay this amount of money for it? But it's out of stock anyway, so you can't have it. $2,000 for the Ventus, bargain. Actually is RLP, but I mean, out of stock, out of stock, out of stock. I think you're getting the gist here, really. If you want a 5090 from Newegg, it's not going to happen. What happens if we look at 5080s? Is this going to be any different? Out of stock, out of stock, out of stock, out of stock. That's also not happening. Which leaves us with the 5070 Ti, which, as I say, is the one I would be recommending anyway, especially at its RLP. Emphasis on the fact that it's still a very lazy launch, but it is at least the best of a bad bunch. Let's just go with that. Maybe look at the used market, but I think people know what they're doing when it comes to the used market. But yes, if you want to grab yourself a Zotac Solid for $999, you can do that. Or if you want to grab yourself a TUF, you can do that. I'm not going to specifically say you should spend $1,000 on this because it's just so tricky, because usually I say just wait and see what happens. But obviously if you're in the States, for all we know, things could be about to get a lot worse. We don't really know at the time of filming. So I'm just going to say if you have to have a high-end graphics card card at the moment, you want it to be NVIDIA, I would say if you can get the 5070 Ti, that's the one personally I would pick unless there's an offer on, but it seems unlikely. So yes, it looks like your only option at the moment is to spend $1,000, which I'm not happy with, but if we are going to do a high-end build, then that is the high-end option. I mean, you could, of course, also consider doing like a pre-built system from a system integrator. That's probably the best way of getting hold of one of these graphics cards at a close to normal price. And if you are buying the rest of the system and all of these parts anyway, definitely is worth considering. Unless you go for a 9070 XT, but I'm not hopeful. Out of stock, out of stock, out of stock. So we're sticking with the 5070 Ti. Moving back to somewhat more of a reality though, we can of course now look at our CPU coolers. And it's a bit of a weird one because if you're going for an X3D chip, they don't actually use like a crazy amount of power, especially compared to Intel CPUs, but you still want something decent, not only to look good, but obviously to keep your system running cool, but fundamentally also quiet. There's quite a few options. I mean, if you want to save yourself some money, because it looks like you're gonna have to spend it on the graphics card, then there are gonna be a few ways of doing this actually. The Montech coolers I quite like, but if you want to go for like this one here, look from MSI, it's $100 or so. Their Core Liquid A13. I mean, it does look quite nice actually in the pictures. I haven't used this one though. We're going to add this to the basket because if you want to go for like a high-end cooler, something like the Trikes or maybe like an NZXT or something that has a display, then you're going to have to spend a lot more money to do that. It depends really what your priority is, but I think in this climate, maximizing performance is, well, it's always going to be the priority, but definitely in this climate, I think that's going to be the priority more than ever. Of course, we will also need to grab ourselves a case, and the one I'm going to say here is this one, which is the Fantex NV5 Mark II. It is my favorite case on the market. I absolutely love it. The quality is fantastic, and the way it looks is fantastic. Just be aware it doesn't come with any case fans, so you will have to add your own, which of course we will be doing in a second, but for $120, I think this is a steal. I actually use this in white, it's my personal rig. The good news is that your fans don't need to do anything particularly crazy, just make sure that they're the right size, so 120 or 140. And with these ones, I'm gonna buy reverse blades, or I'm gonna recommend reverse blades, because they're gonna fit on the sides, so if you wanna see all of this lovely like infinite mirror RGB effect, you're gonna wanna make sure you buy the reverse ones, rather than if you had it the other way, then you just see the back of the fan. Not the end of the world, but would be annoying. So we're gonna add these to our basket, and then if you did want to add another one on the left-hand side of your system, then you can do that. It's not essential. It would probably make everything look a little bit neater, but it's more of a personal preference because in terms of ventilation and airflow, it's not going to make a massive amount of difference when you've got that 360 up top. But ladies and gentlemen, with all of that added, I'm pleased to say we are now at the end with our final component, the power supply for the high-end rig. And here we're going to go for 1000 watts, but I would recommend going for at least 1200 if you're going for a 5090, not only because you're going to need a lot of power, but also it's going to reduce the risk of coil whine, which on the 5090 is definitely pretty darn annoying. But let's have a look what we have. We have all of our ATX3 power supplies here, so we can power it with just a single cable, not having to use any adapters. And you can see that 1000 watts definitely does start to get a fair bit more expensive. And actually the one that is catching my eye is this one, FSP Hydro PTM X Pro. Terrible name. I've used quite a few of their power supplies and they're all kind of similarly named, so it's quite confusing. But fundamentally, this one has a platinum rating, so it is going to be more efficient. It's going to save you a little bit of money over time. Also bear in mind if you're going to use cable extensions or swap out the cables for like a cable kit, if you bought a Corsair power supply, then bear that in mind, because something like FSP, I don't think you can easily buy replacement cables for it, like in braided, like cable mod and stuff. You'd have to use extensions. So bear all of that stuff in mind, but we add this to our basket, and then that leaves us with our total. And it's not quite as bad as I thought, but I'm not sure really if that is very encouraging or not. $2,467 plus any applicable sales tax. So not quite as bad as I thought. I mean, we have obviously made it up a little bit with our 9800 X3D, which is great, but then we're paying through the nose for the graphics card. Everything else seems to be okay, but I think some of the prices, maybe things like motherboards, are starting to creep up a little bit as well. And when you do that across 8, 9, 10 components, obviously that can become quite dramatic. So it's a bit disappointing, but it's not like as bad as I thought it was going to be, which is good. But it's just difficult because I don't want to sit here and tell you should spend £1,000 on an RTX 5070 Ti, but we don't know whether that's going to get cheaper or more expensive in the States. Hopefully it's different everywhere else, but it is definitely going to affect everyone. So let's just kind of watch this space. I'm not here to pass judgment on what's going on. It's just the reality that there is going to be a lot of price fluctuation. And as I say, we don't know which way it's going to go. But let us know what you think of this rig though, because it's going to be awesome. As I say, I love that case. I'm looking at it there. It's an absolutely beautiful bit of kit. But we'd love to hear your thoughts on all of these rigs, so let us know down in the comment section below. Do you think prices are going to get more expensive? Do you think they're going to get cheaper? We'd love to hear your thoughts and your insight on this. But as I say, no matter where you are in the world, if you do want to check out current pricing on anything that was featured in this video, you can find it listed down below. But smash the like button if you've enjoyed this video, get yourself subscribed, and we'll catch you in the next one.